speaking of children under 18 coming to this country, talk about DACA and what, deferred action for childhood arrivals. Again, the sort of landmark, supposed to be temporary policy under Obama, and craft a pathway to citizenship for 600,000 people. Where does it stand now, and what are DACA recipients thinking, saying? Like, what is, I hear it's like in a court in New Orleans. Like, what the hell? Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, you combine all the complexity of the immigration system with the courts, and it's just people are lost, right?
Right.
But with DACA, what's going on in DACA? I'm a DACA recipient, which it basically means that I came before, when I was a child to the U.S. And there's certain things that I qualified for this program that gives me a work permit, so I can work, I can travel within the U.S. and so on. So right now, what's going on is that the case, Trump ended the program, and then again, everything went to the courts. So skipping a ton of information, I'll just say where it is now, which is in the Fifth Circuit. I was just in New Orleans not too long ago. That's where I ended up getting COVID. But I was just in New Orleans, and we went to the Fifth Circuit there to see how the hearing went, and it turns out that these judges are very conservative. They are not necessarily the type of judges that you would have a lot of hope for. And so there's a possibility that within the next few months, they could potentially end the program. We could have a miracle in which they decide to keep it. And I say miracle because majority of the lawyers think that they are so conservative that it's like very high percentage that they will end the program, the possibility of that. And so for us right now, it's super important, that we're educating people to like renew their work permits. You can do it every 2 years. And then also, it's crazy how Congress is not doing crap right now. And we know the filibusters and, stopping a lot of things and so on. But we're still at least saying, to senators and Congress people that this is the moment to pass the DREAM Act, which has been something that we've been fighting for decades, and it could potentially protect people if the program is, ended by the Fifth Circuit. But, of course, it would go to the Supreme Court afterwards, but you all know how the Supreme Court looks like right now.
Look at.
So all we could do right now is potentially end the filibuster or try to get 10 Republicans to pass the DREAM Act, which is also a really long shot. So we're in a bad situation, but we got to keep pushing. That's all we can do for now.
Right. I think we just need a few more handouts to Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, Erika, and we're there. We're so close to buying them off. Can you just briefly state what's in the DREAM Act, what it says?
Yeah, so basically if you came to, there's been a bunch of versions, and I mean, it was introduced in like 2001. That's how old this bill is, and it hasn't passed. And it has like over 70% of support from, American citizens and so on. So it's crazy. But it allows for people who came to this country as children, who have a high school diploma, who meet all these criteria, that you're not supposed to have any felonies and so on, to be a good immigrant, as, folks call it.
Right.
And you would be allowed to be in the path to citizenship. So you can, apply for residency and then eventually become a citizen of this country. And yeah, there's been a lot of versions. The current version, passed the House, but it has been, basically stuck in there.
Where all bills go to die. Yeah. The Senate.
That's right.
Basically. I mean, has it even? Yeah. I'm assuming it hasn't even come up for a vote.
Not in the Senate, no.
Right.
No. And it has. I mean, it's got a lot, So the last time the DREAM Act came for a vote in the Senate, actually did. It was in 2010, and it passed the House, and it went to the Senate, only to be killed by the filibuster. Senator McCain filibustered it back then, and we had 5 Republicans voting for it in the Senate. And 5 Democrats either didn't vote or voted against it. So, that's when my anger started with this whole, all Democrats are pro-immigrant narrative, which is completely false. There's a lot of Democrats who are still subscribing to that idea that immigrants come here to, whatever, steal jobs or whatever the narrative is from the right. So
Right.
it's frustrating. Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. I mean, it feels like legislatively there's a bit of a dead end, clearly, with this current makeup. Except you've got Biden and you've got some executive action. Is there executive action he could be taking right now when it comes to creating a pathway for citizenship and circumventing? I mean, DACA was effectively that, thanks to a ton of organizing by folks like yourself. But is there a pathway around executive action at this point? Yeah, that might get, stopped in the courts, but
yeah, I mean, that's the challenge, right? The thinking about what can survive if it goes through the courts, because of course, all the Republican states are going to jump into killing it again. But I will say, a lot of people are still being deported, and it's ICE who's deporting them and Border Patrol, and they're still under DHS, and DHS is still under the president. And so to me, it's important to always highlight that, yes, there are a lot of policies that are going to be stopped by the courts, but at the end of the day, ICE still has a lot of discretion. And
yes.
if the president wanted, they could ensure that people, my own mom is in deportation proceedings right now. I've been fighting that for a decade now. And every time I try to, I work on her case with our attorney, I can see how much discretion ICE agents have. Her deportation agent can literally decide to keep her here or deport her the next day if they wanted to. Jesus. And so there's so much, that we could.
This is an ICE agent?
Do. This is a deportation officer, right?
Yeah.
That who could potentially decide if a person can stay or leave, from one day to the other, depending on their case, obviously. But if you can imagine, right? My mom is 64, and she just had a great granddaughter. I'm kind of aging myself here, but she's a great grandma, and and she's literally under the hands right now of a deportation officer who could decide, what her fate is. And so it's important for us to continue to push the president and their administration to, try to. Just like Steve Miller, y'all remember that character from the Trump administration?
Yeah, that piece of shit living in a blanket fort. Yeah.
He pushed the envelope so hard because of his hate of immigrants. I mean, his passion against immigrants was so much that he didn't care. He pushed the envelope on all these policies. We don't have that. We don't have the opposite of that in the Biden administration. We don't have it. And so we don't have anybody who's sitting there trying to figure out how creative, or being creative and creating this types of, policy changes that can be done by the president to stop deporting people. And it's frustrating as well.
Actually, I was, there was this really great piece about one specifically young Biden administration member, a young Latina woman, I believe, who was working around Andrea Flores, who was working on immigration reform, and she eventually resigned just because there was no pathway forward for her to actually affect change, and either was asked to resign or has resigned herself. But it's this is a young, anyway, I just wanted to name her. I'm glad you're bringing her up, because you're and she was not arguing to defund ICE, even though ICE should be defunded, and even ICE wants to be defunded, and that's a story for another time, because they're people hate us, and we're we know. But even she was for lack of a better term, iced out of the administration.
She did, and I encourage people to read her op-ed, Andrea Flores. I don't remember where she posted it, but it was a great op-ed. And one of the things she says is that she saw ways in which there can be processes to get people in, right? If you wanted to process thousands of asylum seekers, for them to come and fight their case, that there's ways to do that, but there's no will. And that's the part that, we have seen, that the will from the administration to actually create, the processes and the pathways for people to come and ask for asylum. Like a lot of Ukrainians are doing it right now.
Right.
I mean, if I'm going to go back to that, because I've seen, people on the ground who have been working with migrants. I saw this photo on Twitter from a friend of mine who works at the border, and there's this like shelter, in Mexico of people who are arriving who are Ukrainian, and there's another one of Central Americans, and I mean, you can see how different it looks, right? Like just the way they're treated is completely different, and so it's yeah, people should definitely go read her op-ed, and yeah, it's crazy.
Martina, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in if you wanted to ask anything, say anything. I had one last question.
No, I'm not flabbergasted. Like you said, they don't have someone the opposite, which is on par for the stagnant Biden administration. But yeah, I think that if you make it here to do what a lot of people do to have to get here, you should be able to stay, and especially if you're seeking asylum. But if you're black or brown, you go back, and if you're white, you can stay.
Right.
And we're a country built by immigrants and people who were forced to be here. So yeah, it's very frustrating, and I can't imagine how it feels for you.
Yeah, and the other thing I will point out is it all, the Ukraine situation is so fascinating because it all sort of stems from like what you define as a war, whereas the United States has been funneling so much money and illicitly and not illicitly, the guns that are flowing into Mexico and Central America, fueling the drug war, fueling all that. But that's a decades long war, whereas now we're funding Ukraine's resistance against Russia, and that's a war. But this other thing, that's no, that's not a war. There can't be asylum seekers from that war.
We're funding it, and especially how Ukrainian people treat the immigrants for their country.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yes, immigrants. Yeah. Yes, non-white Ukrainian immigrants.
Yes,
who were
exactly.
trying to
who
escape.
Couldn't get on
there.
trains and stuff.
Exactly, for sure. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.